All right, welcome into SEC Live here on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller, Jackson Johnson, Josh Mahler back on the program for the first time in quite some time. Glad to have you back. Tucker Harlan, we got the full four guys here to break down some SEC football news because we've got a lot of transfer portal talk that we want to get into, have some NFL draft declarations from some key players across the SEC, and of course, the Ole Miss Rebels taking on Miami out in the Fiesta Bowl with a trip to the national championship game on the line. So, going to get into all of that here tonight. But we wanted to start off with some NFL draft news and got probably the biggest announcement thus far for an SEC player choosing to hit the portal. Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson. 1 year as the starter with the Tide, obviously after staying in Tuscaloosa for a few seasons, sort of riding it out and waiting for his opportunity. A good year, didn't close the way he probably wanted it to, but still put up really big numbers and is projected as one of the top quarterbacks to go in the draft. So we'll turn it over to our local Alabama expert here in Jackson. What are your thoughts on Simpson and his decision to go ahead into the NFL?
Well, when we talked about what the decision was going to be Monday night with Travion, Jeffrey, and myself on Alabama Voice College Football, Travion and I compared it to Quinn Ewers if he returned to Texas for 2025, if Simpson returned for the 2026 season for Alabama. Because luckily, you could hold off Keelan Russell for 2025, but not for 2026. Not even for Austin Mack. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if he had returned for 2026, who knows what that would have meant for the QB room. Because, like, Keelan Russell could stay. But could you count on Austin Mack staying? Probably not. He'd probably want to dip his toe into the pond to see what else is there, just see what's up. And honestly, this is the best move for all involved. Because, like Ty Simpson, going to the 2026 NFL draft, this year's QB room is not very good. It's not like 2024. It's not like past years. It's just pretty sloppy. Besides Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore, Ty Simpson picked a good time to declare for the draft. Because let's be honest, though, the Raiders, who are they going to take? We don't know. The Jets, we don't know who they're going to take. The Cardinals, they're probably done with Kyler Murray. The Steelers, I doubt they're sticking with Aaron Rodgers after this season. And the Rams with Matthew Stafford, he's obviously returning for 2026. But the question is Stafford return for 2027? No. He's definitely not returning for 2028. The Rams are definitely going to have to plan for their next QB. And that's where Ty Simpson would definitely fit into the mold for the Sean McVay offense for the Los Angeles Rams. So Simpson made a great decision. And as for like Keelan Russell and Austin Mack, we really get to the nitty-gritty of the quarterback battle between Mack and Russell. Who's going to be the starter for 2026? We'll know that by the end of spring, but we'll definitely know it before September 5th of 2026 against East Carolina.
It creates a really interesting situation in Tuscaloosa, obviously, with the quarterback battle we're going to see. And I think you're right. Simpson choosing to go avoids any kind of awkward situation around Alabama. If he had come back to Tuscaloosa or announced his intention to come back to Alabama, what does that mean for a guy like Keelan Russell on the roster that obviously Alabama's so high on? And then depending on who wins the starting job and how they perform, it's going to get judged against one another over the course of the season. And also for Simpson, as you laid out, he's probably going to be a first-round pick now. And the quarterback class being what it is, Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore are the only other guys being really discussed as serious first-round pick options. And Simpson, even with some of the struggles down the stretch, played well for much of the season. And I think showed an ability to operate an offense at a high level and operate NFL-style concepts in the pass game, which is something that will always stand out to me because of the number of kids coming out of college that just don't do that these days because of the way a lot of these offenses are set up. He's got things he's got to work on for sure. And, I think we saw how he handles pressure, some of the accuracy, that stuff's got to improve. But capable of playing quarterback at a high level at his best. I think it's a really nice move for Simpson. And, ushers in a new era for Alabama football. Let's talk about some of the other moves in the draft, and I'll open up either Josh or Tucker, either of you here. What are other players you've seen declare out of the SEC that you think are significant storylines?
Just to touch on Ty Simpson real quick, I do agree with Jackson. I think that this is just a really good year to jump in there because of where you're at. And he named off the two guys, Dante Moore, who I don't believe has really declared yet, but is most likely going to declare. That's going to be a guy above him, and then Heisman Doza, the Heisman winner himself. So that's the two guys that I feel like could be right above him. And then it's a good moment for you. You can't really look out for the best interest of the team. You got to look out for the best interest for yourself. But yeah, I mean, I know we were talking just before this. There was quite a few different guys that kind of declared throughout January. I think most recently, one that kind of stood out to me was the Aggies offensive lineman Chase. Did we say Bisontis? Is that what we decided on?
Yeah, that or Bisontis, one of the two of them.
Yeah, something like that. But I thought that was an interesting one to see jump in there. I think that was just yesterday that he declared. So yeah, I mean, you've got a few from Georgia, so they're going to start to kind of clear their roster out from. They're used to that though. I feel like they're constantly having to rebuild. They have a few guys with Zachariah Branch being one of the big ones from Georgia that's going out, and really all three from Georgia too that we were talking about earlier, just before the hit and record, are all underclassmen really. That you've got CJ Allen, who's a junior, Zachariah Branch, who's a junior, and then you've got Kristen Miller, who's a redshirt junior. So just interesting to me that you're seeing some younger guys jumping into the NFL. And I think you're probably going to see more of that as you get through the NIL portal. You'll probably also see a lot more really late portal or NFL declarations, seventh year guys and stuff like that. But, just very interesting there.
Yeah, I wanted to throw my 2 cents in on Ty Simpson as well, because he was being linked to a certain school potentially if he was going to enter the transfer portal. So for Alabama fans' sake, yes, it is definitely in their best interest that Ty Simpson ended up going to the draft and did not decide to play college football next season, because it would have created an awkward situation had he stayed or had he gone. I feel like, just because there's a handful of teams out there that are still needy for quarterbacks out of the transfer portal, and I'm sure we're going to talk about one of them here in a little bit. But you look around Oregon and Miami, two teams that are constantly looking for players, quarterbacks in particular, out of the transfer portal. Both of those teams could have gotten him, and obviously he decided to go to the draft. And the Dante Moore thing is interesting because he can still come back, and it's like, do you want to play for the Jets next season? Is the other thing I've heard being thrown around about him too. And I don't know many quarterbacks that would like to do that, but no, Simpson will get drafted in the first round. I have a feeling. It feels like a certainty at this point that the Cardinals are looking to move on from Kyler Murray. Dolphins are probably going to move on from Tua, as much as I hate how that ended. Tua, you're just at a point now where you've seen 5 or 6 years of that guy now, and he just hasn't been producing the result that you've wanted. The injuries have gotten in the way that you just have to move on eventually. And then, of course, Jackson mentioned Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. That's another potential landing spot. So I do think there is a place for Ty Simpson in this draft. What is behind Ty Simpson, I have no idea in that class. But as far as draft declarations go, I think Zachariah Branch is an intriguing entry into the draft, just because of the agility he brings, the twitch that he's got, that I think NFL teams are going to really like in their slots. So you have that one. And then there's a couple more, and we figured these guys would probably get drafted. And those are the two Tennessee corners, Jermon McCoy and Colton Hood. McCoy, I think, is still projecting middle of the first round. Hood, in some projections, has been near the bottom of the first round and then like early on in day 2. So Tennessee, despite having an 8-5 season, they've got several guys that have declared for the draft at this point, and I would not be surprised if 3 or 4 of them went in the first couple days. So, but overall, it just doesn't feel like we've had a ton of huge declarations yet for the drafts, aside from the ones that we've mentioned.
Yeah, it's mostly been just about everybody expected. Not a lot of surprising entrants at this point. It feels like, much of the conversation, all the focus is sort of on the transfer portal in terms of guys moving around, and maybe even a few guys that we could have thought might have made a move to the NFL. I know you talked about Lance Hurd earlier with Tennessee as a guy that maybe that could have happened. Instead, he's in the portal. We'll see where he ultimately lands. Let's talk about the transfer portal, because obviously there's a ton happening across the board in college football, but we have a lot happening in the SEC, especially because you have so many coaching changes in this league. That's always going to lead to a lot of movement across the board. I think you had a lot of SEC teams this season with very disappointing seasons, which means you're going to have a lot of heavy work in the transfer portal trying to fix the problem from a year ago. We'll start with the quarterback market. That's where the eyeballs are always going to go. And the first thing we have to discuss is LSU's search of a quarterback. You had Sam Leavitt, who we'll talk about more here in just a bit, visiting Baton Rouge. He's with Kiffin at the sidelines for a basketball game. And like that same night, we find out that Damon Williams, who's an outstanding quarterback for Washington, despite having already announced he was re-signing with the Huskies and going to return to play for Jed Fish for another season, planned to enter the transfer portal and was immediately being linked to Lane Kiffin and LSU, which has created a complete firestorm right now, both in terms of, like, one, it's a big-time story. Just can LSU get this high-level player? Is he actually going to leave Washington? And then what does this mean for college football, that you have a kid sign with the school for probably big money, and he's able to immediately try to hit the portal once again, and Washington's talking about legal action to keep him there, and what is all of that going to mean? Where do y'all land on this whole situation? We'll set aside if they get Damon Williams here for a second. Just big picture thoughts on Damon Williams and LSU and that situation as a whole.
Oh Lord! But I got a post from Ralph Amsden talking about this whole thing, and this where it shows the Instagram comment of Coach Fish's wife talking about her take, where she says, announces during a funeral of an athlete at the University of Washington. How disgusting. While all of his other teammates were at the funeral. And Amsden says Damon Williams definitely isn't coming back to Seattle if the head coach's wife is calling his actions disgusting. On a public reply to Barstool Sports' main Instagram account, this shows that litigation against Damon Williams will be just punitive. A lot of people are probably okay with that. And you know, she's getting roast in the comments about her husband, you know, on how his tenure was at Arizona, but that's neither here nor there. But honestly, I'm just like, are we ready to have a new show called The Real Housewives of College Football? I mean, I'm sure Andy Cohen won't mind doing a show like that, doing like the little post game on the Bravo channel. He needs to talk some college football after all. But anyway, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Damon Williams. Like, is he going to stay at Washington? Is he going to LSU? Is he going elsewhere that we don't know of? Who knows? I mean, this situation is just a giant cluster. Like, we thought he was like you said, we thought he would stay with Washington going into 2026, but no, he could be going elsewhere.
Yeah, I was talking to Chris Phillips from SEC Unfiltered earlier today. Kind of stemmed from social media, and we were talking about it, and where he just mentioned, if I'm Washington, I'm doing everything in my power to try to make sure that he can't play for the 2026 season. Not that you know, like you're you know, thinking that you can stop him or anything like that, but just to try to make a point. And the biggest mess of all of this is the fact that the NCAA has no say-so in any of this. Yeah. You know, I think you have to make an example of this kid if you're Washington. He signed a contract, and you're going to teach these college students, when you sign a contract, this is what happens. Even if you do move on, we're going to make your life hell trying to get through all this litigation. That's, I mean, I feel like this whole, you know, I know we'll probably talk about Mitchie here in a little bit too, but you know, I see the case with him, and there's been several players now that I'm seeing that flip their commitments. They commit to a team and then flip their commitment. And now you've got this where you sign a contract, a legally binding contract saying that you're going to stick around with the team, and then you just dip as soon as you see more money, you know, somewhere else. And this is the part of the transfer portal and NIL era that I think most of us traditionalists hate about it, and it gives a bad rap to NIL and to the transfer portal as a whole, even though this is just the loud minority that happens. And so that's kind of what I think with this whole Damon situation. It's just it's a shame, and I really hope Washington can do something about it. I just don't think they can.
Yeah, it's a whole mess, and the sad thing is, Josh, all these things are fixable. They really are, but you don't have the governing body in place to fix it, or the brain power among the governing body to fix it, I guess is the best way to put it. But I just don't see a way that Damon Williams is anywhere other than LSU after this whole thing. And by the way, shout out to LSU. They have created 3 of the messiest situations in college football in the last, 4 months now? From firing Brian Kelly and getting your governor involved in a coaching search to trying to raid your biggest rival of both their coach, his assistants, and all of their talent, only for it to backfire aside from the offensive assistants and the coach that you're bringing down. You haven't been able to get anybody from Ole Miss out of the portal. And now you're out here openly tampering with a quarterback in Washington, who Washington is now trying to send to you because they don't want you anymore. But
it is fitting too that like if you're going to burn your team, you might as well go to the coach that also burnt his whole team too.
Yes, exactly. And another reason I say that too, guys, is I've been covering this a little bit just throughout the day. Washington is having some visits from other quarterbacks. I know one in particular is Bo Pribula to potentially be their quarterback next season just because of what we've seen happen blowing up there. I know Pribula had visits to Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, but I would imagine Washington would be a nice fit for him just because it's a Big Ten team. SEC and Big Ten, I think, are your 2 best power conferences at the moment, most complete power conferences. So I think that could be a draw there. But again, I don't see a way Damon Williams is wearing purple and gold next season. Well, at least not that kind of purple and gold.
I won't tell you like that whole the situations you laid out that LSU has created. They could have like a whole arc on what they've done over the last few months. I mean, it's basically a South Park episode at this point.
Is it the next Netflix documentary?
Jack, you know what's hilarious? I tweeted last night during their game where they were getting blitzed by South Carolina at home in basketball. It's like, I'm starting to think Lane Kiffin put a curse on that athletics department. Not but an hour later, the Damon Williams news breaks. It keeps getting messy down there. I don't know. I don't know how they get past this. And I hate even bringing this up. Do you know what hat Lane Kiffin was wearing on the sideline at that game with Sam Levitt last night? He was wearing an Our Lady of the Lake Hospital hat. The same hospital they took money from Miguel Alexander.
Oh, yeah.
These people have no standards.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, LSU, South Carolina basketball, it's all about Lane Kiffin and how he feels. And he's got to get his nails done at 5 o'clock at 2 p.m.
Their women's program has gone in the toilet the last few weeks, if you haven't seen that.
Oh, boy.
I really think he has set a curse on them.
LSU is consistently one of the wildest. I mean, Louisiana is one of the wildest states. It is the culture there as a whole. But it's a truly crazy thing to see. And there was part of the question I was going to ask is, do you want a quarterback who would do this to a team? Like, and what that means from a locker room standpoint. But frankly, to your point, he's going to play for a coach who did it to his team. That team could legitimately win the national championship now. And so it's probably a match made in heaven. I don't know what you could do about it. And, the point
I would not want to hang around either one of those guys. That's for sure.
Yeah, no. The point made continually, I mean, as long as the players are not employees, it's kind of hard to even make these contracts legitimate and binding. So, yeah, it sucks for Washington. And Josh, you said it earlier. This is right. This is the type of stuff we see in the portal that is not fun. And I'm sure like LSU fans will be celebrating it. And Tiger fans, I'm not trying to dunk on you. Like, I think every fan base, if you were going to get the high level player, because college football fans, we're always going to tell ourselves what our team did is the right thing to do. If LSU gets Damon Williams, they're going to be happy, and they're not going to give a crap about what happened in Washington. And every other fan base would probably feel the exact same way. It sucks, though, that a kid can be like, I am coming back to this school. I've agreed to come back to this school. And then it's like, oh, wait, I got an opportunity. I can go elsewhere. I'm gone. Bye. That's not what this is supposed to be, but that's what it's become, and it's hard to rein that in. And look, if they get Damon Williams, he's a really good player, man. He's a very talented passer. Working in it, I know Jed Fish, and I always pay attention to these things, like what he does offensively. Like, he does not make life easy on his QBs. Like, he asks a lot of the quarterback from in terms of reading defenses, in terms of progressing across the field, and working through reads. He doesn't make life easy mode, and Damon Williams has played at a high level as a passer. He's got the athleticism that he's a great runner as well. I think he could probably step into LSU and with an even more wide open offense with what Kiffin's going to run, especially with, we'll talk about the LSU class here in a second, the wide receivers that they're bringing in. I think it'd be a great fit. Now, I mean, if that doesn't happen, we can now talk about this other quarterback that's been flirting with multiple SEC programs to this point, including now one of the schools of one of our hosts here, Sam Leavitt from Arizona State. There was all the talk in the world he was going to go join Will Stein at Kentucky, and then that ultimately doesn't happen. We hear him talking about going to Texas Tech, and Texas Tech ends up with Brendan Sorsby. Well, then, like we said, Leavitt was down at LSU taking a visit in with Kiffin, while Kiffin is actively trying to get Damon Williams to hit the portal. We've now most recently heard Sam Leavitt is considering Tennessee. Tucker, what are your thoughts there?
So he is in Knoxville as we speak. He is on a visit in Knoxville visiting Josh Heupel. This is an interesting one because he was pretty much the first quarterback to decide to enter the portal in this cycle, and he's not landed anywhere yet. I don't know. Maybe it's the whole team banquet thing that are rubbing people the wrong way about what happened at Arizona State. But I'm curious to see what Tennessee does with the portal. Unless they're just confident that Joey Aguilar will for sure get that next year of eligibility, they got to do something. They got to do something in the portal at some point. I know Tennessee's pretty much been taking the good things happen to those who wait approach to the transfer portal so far. They have a few commitments, but not a ton of them. But with Leavitt, because it's interesting because he entered the portal with a do not contact tag, which generally means I have a destination in mind. But we've also heard that he's visited now 4 different programs. He was interested in Texas Tech. Texas Tech goes with Sorsby. He's interested in Kentucky. Kentucky goes with Minchie. Interested in LSU. LSU evidently is not interested enough in him because they are actively tampering with the guy that we just talked about, Damon Williams. So now he's at Tennessee. Now, I've mentioned them before, and I'll mention them again. Miami and Oregon are still without quarterbacks. Sam Leavitt is from just south of Portland, Oregon, which is about an hour and a half north. I think I looked this up on maps from Eugene, Oregon, via I-5. So you would be close to home if you were to play there if you're Sam Leavitt. Hell, maybe Washington gives him a call at this point because that's not that far away from Seattle. So I think there are still a lot of options for Sam Leavitt. And of course, there's still a few more quarterbacks in the portal that have not committed. We mentioned Purbulla earlier. Dylan Raiola is the other one that I cannot for the life of me figure out. I don't think he ends up at Tennessee. I can't see that happening, man. He's like Nico cosplaying as Patrick Mahomes. It's brutal. He's moved around 4 different times in high school, and he's already hit the portal 2 years into college. I don't see Josh Heupel wanting to do that. So, but yeah, I've heard nothing about where he's going. I guess Leavitt is Tennessee's best option at the moment, the transfer portal, and I'm sure just because of who Josh Heupel is, he will be able to fit Leavitt into the system and make it work for the year or two that he's there. Because I have full faith in both George McIntyre and Faison Brandon in the future at Tennessee. But you're an injury or a couple injuries away from potentially running Mike Matthews as a Wildcat quarterback, just because those are your only 2 scholarship quarterbacks at the moment. Your third is a walk-on in Mason Phillips from Sevierville, Tennessee. So would be nice for Tennessee if they could get Sam Levitt or anybody out of the portal at this point at quarterback.
So I was curious for your take on that, and I'll say in a second my thoughts on Levitt, which I've expressed before. But I agree, within Heupel's system, he could probably be very, very effective. I think most quarterbacks can. Do you want to see Tennessee take the high price tag quarterback route again? And obviously you had that with Nico a few years ago. A little bit of a different situation because he was a high school recruit. And I think maybe Joey didn't give everything Tennessee fans wanted to see this year, but overall had a productive season. And offensively, the Vols, for the most part, did enough this year. It was a better offense than a season ago, that's for sure. Which it was a low bar to clear, but still.
One thing I wanted to mention, Andrew, about that with the price tag thing, and I get where you're coming from here. He is asking for a lot of money. I wonder if we're at a point where he's been interested in all these schools and they didn't want to pay him that much, and it's similar to what happened with Nico, where people are just like, hey, you're not worth as much as you think you are, so he ultimately has to settle for less. Maybe Tennessee hopes it can get into some kind of situation like that. I'm just saying it just because he's an option for Tennessee at this point. But again, you look around.
Are they going to have to do a lot defensively in terms of additions in the portal?
Yes, they are. They've gotten 2 on the defensive end so far, both secondary guys. They need to attack the defensive line still. Rodney Garner's a good identifier of talent, but there's not a ton of bodies on the defensive line right now. So they're going to have to do some work there. So, yes, they're going to have to spend a lot on the defensive side of the ball. So I do get where you're coming from there.
Yeah, so I'll say my piece about Levitt, and then I'll let Jackson or Josh get their thoughts in, because I know it's been the two of us going back and forth here for a sec. I am not a Sam Levitt guy, and maybe it's just I'm being overreactive to watching him twice against Mississippi State, but I've seen him now twice against 2 bad Mississippi State defenses not look good. I think he was incredibly overly reliant on Jordan Tyson and Kenny Dillingham and their offensive staff doing a good job of scheming up matchups where Tyson could get wide open, and then you could just put him as the first read on every single play, let him throw up to it. I think he gets antsy in the pocket when he can't throw to his first read. I think he's overly reliant on trying to escape and make plays with his legs. And to be clear, everything I said describes like 70% of college quarterbacks. Like most college QBs play that way. And obviously the guys who can do it at such an incredible level that there's this playmaking ability that it just finds a way to win games. I get why they make the money they do. But the point I made, though, that so many college quarterbacks play that way, I don't want to spend top dollar on a quarterback who's going to do that, personally. If I think you could find another option who could provide a similar output. Now, Josh Heupel's offense, like at its core, you're not asking the quarterback to do as much. It is a lot of throwing to your first read. It's a lot of scheming one guy open downfield. And also we've seen like having quarterbacks with the ability to extend plays with their legs is such a big benefit within that system as well. He'd be a fit for what Heupel wants to do. I just think from a value add standpoint, especially with what you have to do defensively and improve there, I don't know if I would spend the asking price. But to your point, maybe now Levitt's going to have to just come to grips with the terms that he's not going to get the money that he thought he would coming out. So we'll see. I mean, I don't think it would be a bad addition for Tennessee. My only concern would be, does it impact your ability to go out and get other players and maybe some other needs?
Yeah, I originally thought when I first saw this news come out that he was visiting Tennessee, I thought it was Tucker that put it down in the chat that I can't wait to talk about how overrated he was, and it was super ironic. So I pulled up the group chat earlier when we were talking about this, when we were discussing discussing this. However, I'm supposed to say that. Anyways, I looked that up and I was like, oh, it was Andrew. It wasn't quite as funny, but
I'm a Levitt hater. I am.
No, I agree with you to some point, and I think he's proving right now maybe he is a little bit overrated already through the portal because he's not being picked up by anybody. And like you said, Tucker, the fact that he goes in with a no contact tag, I thought for sure like, Texas Tech, LSU, or there was another one that was on my mind early on that I was like, all right, these 3 are Oregon might have been the one that I was thinking of. I was like, yeah, these 3 are the ones that he's going to go visit them because he already had contact with them. So he's not going to let anybody else try to persuade him, and he's going to make his decision pretty quick. And sure enough, like here we are still. And that would have been like one of the first guys I would have expected to see commit somewhere. And here he is still still waiting for an answer. So it is really interesting. I don't know that I would say that he's overrated on the field. I don't know, but I do agree that Tennessee could be a really good fit. But again, he could be a good fit without spending so much money. I think you've got to calculate the risk to the pocketbook specifically. And I know Tennessee isn't hurting there, but you still have to think about that whenever it comes to really any player. And I know we were talking about this on the Oklahoma channel early on when Cam Coleman was talked about. Hey, Oklahoma is going to try to press really hard for Cam Coleman, and then they saw how much he was really wanting, and they were like, never mind. You can look at the other places because you can pay a lot of money for a key player like Sam Levitt, but is that money worth the outcome that he ends up giving you in the long run? And that's where I think a lot of teams are kind of coming to the realization with him. And same with LSU. Would we rather pay him this much, or maybe go after somebody else who might be able to give us a little bit more of an upside? So really interested to see where he ends up, though.
Jackson, any thoughts on Levitt, or do you want to lead us into some other quarterbacks that have committed to SEC programs?
I'll be honest. I think Levitt is basically going to decide between Tennessee or Washington at this point, because I mean those are basically the two best choices for him. Especially with Williams. I mean that ship is getting ready to sail. Williams going to LSU, it looks like. So Levitt would do well to go to Washington or Tennessee at this point. One of the two. One thing's for sure. At least Tennessee will definitely get a quarterback that wants to be there.
And hey, I mean, another former SEC quarterback that maybe could end up in the conference, DJ Lagway. He still hasn't found a landing spot yet. That'd be interesting to see where he goes. And if y'all have any thoughts on that, by all means, go into it. But I thought we could just quickly hit some of the guys who committed.
Oh man, Lagway. I know he's not going to Florida State, but that would have been so funny if he was, because I mean, think about it though. That would be another chapter of the Florida State rivalry on rivalry week.
Well, and I think it would have added to the Florida State's like bad luck of quarterbacks too.
I'll tell you another great chapter. This guy reminds me of Cam Newton. That
I was going to say
the third or fourth chapter of this book. It's been going on for what? Basically 5 years now, starting with KJ Jefferson and who else is it? Jeremy Johnson.
Well, yeah, let's go back in time, because as a Mississippi State fan, I got really pissed off going into the 2015 season when Prescott was still voted preseason first team SEC. There were SEC media members arguing Jeremy Johnson should have been the top quarterback in the conference going into the year based on one half of football, or like two halves of football played in 2014 behind Nick Marshall. And there was a lot of conversation of Jeremy Johnson being the next Auburn. I remember Barrett Sallee was like, he's going to be the first Auburn quarterback to throw for 3,000 and run for 1,000. In one of the biggest crash and burns in SEC history. So yeah, it's gone back. I mean, look, obviously, anytime you have a coach who coached a player like that, every quarterback or similar player is going to draw the comparisons. Like Mississippi State would do it with Dak. Every quarterback that comes from this is the next Dak Prescott. So I get it, but yeah, Lagway getting the next the next Cam Newton comparisons would have been very funny. Byron Brown to Auburn, everybody saw that coming. Which he's a fantastic player. I mean,
I guess I had more to say about Auburn. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. I was going to let y'all.
No, yeah, I do like the pickup with Byron Brown. With Auburn, though, I'm concerned. You're seeing like somewhere around like 10 to 15 players from USF coming over. And I would expect if you're bringing your guys, you're probably going to lean towards them as your starters. I'm concerned elsewhere outside of the quarterback position with Auburn turning into USF trying to play SEC ball.
I wanted to get into Auburn later. We'll come back to that.
Okay, yeah, well, we can touch on that later on then. But as far as Byron Brown, I think that was a solid pickup. He's a good QB, and the law firm kid too. His name sounds like a law firm. Hewitt something or Hewlett. I'm trying to remember what his name is. But they got the freshman from USF as well. So
that's right.
Adding
Lockwood Hewitt, is that what it is?
Yeah, something like that.
It does sound like a law firm.
Yeah, it reminded me. I thought like right away, and then I saw somebody else say the same thing, and I was like, man, it's going around.
Yeah, The Brown pickup, I think, was something we all expected, and I think it's going to help them offensively. They have some other familiar faces coming in from USF offensively. I know a former Tennessee wide receiver, Chaz Nimrod, who transferred down there in the 2024 offseason from Tennessee to reunite with Golish. He's coming up with him. And actually, a former Tennessee tight end commit, Jonathan Eccles, is going to Auburn as well. He flipped, I think, late 2023 cycle to go to, or 2024 cycle to go to USF, and now he's following Golish. So they're bringing in some nice pieces offensively. I think that could work. I mean, we've seen group of five offenses translate to the SEC recently, just with what we've seen at Vanderbilt. Obviously, that's a little bit of a different kind of offense, but we've also seen, the Josh Heupel offense succeed in some years, and we know that Auburn could potentially do the same thing. Now, I think Auburn's season next year could be pretty similar to how things were at the beginning of the Josh Heupel era at Tennessee, just because of all the losses on the defensive end. DJ Durkin being retained was supposed to be this move to kind of stabilize things and make sure you were able to keep the defense intact. And, it was the one redeeming quality of Auburn this year, despite the 5-7 season. Really has been the last couple of years, but now it's like, what do they got there on the defensive end? It's kind of sparse when you're looking around for talent.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hit it then. It's interesting looking at Auburn because, you hire not Josh Heupel, you hire Alex Golish, and you're bringing that offense in. And look, everybody knew Byron Brown, that was going to happen. And immediately, I think the assumption is, man, Auburn was loaded at receiver. Like, those guys can thrive playing in this system. And then they all hit the portal. Cam Coleman, who's, one of the top 5 players available out there right now, going to transfer elsewhere. Might end up in the SEC. I know Texas A&M kind of in the mix, but also Texas Tech is a factor there. But Malcolm Simmons, Perry Thompson, Horatio Fields, Singleton is back, at least appears back, and that's a good player. And, yeah, I'm sure Golish will get competent receivers there, but that feels weird, that those guys would all hit the portal. I guess with Coleman, maybe the argument, it's kind of the classic knock on that system is how does it prepare you for the next level? We'll see if maybe that's it, but it feels weird that many guys would want to leave. Xavier Chaplin at tackle leaving. And then you mentioned the defense, because that was such a big argument for the DJ Durkin thing is Auburn has this incredible defense, a lot of really talented pieces. They're losing some guys to the NFL, but we want to keep that side of the ball intact. There were Auburn fans that wanted DJ Durkin as the head coach, specifically because they wanted to keep that defense intact. And then you look, and your starting corners are gone, and Jay Crawford and Kayan Lee. Robert Woodard at linebacker, who was one of your top linebackers, is gone. And I understand, I've seen with him that the talk is the younger linebackers were going to move ahead. Okay, whatever. That's still a big loss. Defensive line, Amaris Williams off the edge, Malik Blockton at defensive tackle. Those are really good players and guys that you were planning to count on next year. This is kind of starting over for Alex Golish. And any conversation that had been had about Auburn, coming into the year this past season, the talk with Auburn is if they could just figure out quarterback, they've got a ton of talent everywhere else. And that could be a team that's really interesting. Obviously, quarterback crashed and burned. Hugh Freeze crashed and burned. But there was never a question of the talent on the roster. All that talent is saying bye-bye now. They're going to be an interesting team to watch.
Well, and I think a lot of this roster turnover that you're seeing too just kind of shows the work ethic of Hugh Freeze really starting to come out. A lot of the stories that I heard kind of behind the scenes for Auburn seemed like maybe a lot of truth was to those stories that seemed like, I don't know about that. That could be just rumor. But you're starting to see it now because players are leaving. They weren't happy with how things turned out. And not only that, I think it was also shown by the fact that you do have all this talent. And I think very proven talent when you look at the individuals, not as a team, but just the individuals. And they couldn't win games. They couldn't win 6 games, for goodness sakes. So really interesting. But back to what I was saying earlier, before I was trying to jump ahead of you, Andrew, I look at this Auburn team, and it does concern me. I was trying to count them up here while you're talking to try to see there's a significant amount of players in a lot of skill positions, wide receiver, safety. I think there was a linebacker. Yeah, I mean, just several players from a corner. Trying to look through a few more, running back, a tight end. So you're having a lot of these USF players follow their coach over, and that's kind of what concerns me. And I was talking to an Auburn guy about this, and just kind of getting his thoughts. And he kind of, I think he was kind of purposefully being a little optimistic, and he would probably admit that too. But just saying, well, it worked for Curt Cignetti, and I said, well, Curt Cignetti also brought some guys from a roster that went from FCS national championship type caliber team turned FBS winning team to bring them over. It wasn't, and also developed them up to that point. And Curt Cignetti is just an anomaly. That's a guy that you're not going to see many of those in college football. So I am concerned about Auburn that, yeah, they're starting to fill the spots that were there, but are they filling them with the same type of talent? Are they filling them with the same caliber of talent and a caliber of talent that's going to, really put Auburn in any sort of position to win games in the SEC? That's kind of what's got me a little concerned about them right now with getting a lot of these transfers from USF.
If you're an Auburn fan, you're wanting a spin zone, you just have to say, well, hey, the roster went into the swamp and beat Florida, so clearly it's good enough.
And I'm not saying, I'm not cutting down 3-star guys at all, because believe me, especially as an Oklahoma guy, I had to sit there and defend Jim Nagy on his new system and how he evaluates guys. And so I'm not cutting down 3-star guys at all, but there is some truth to when you load it up with 3 stars. Now I know, again, Curt Cignetti did it right. Totally different scenario. Totally different everything about that situation with Curt Cignetti. So he's that was actually a fun stat too, which totally off topic, but the only team in the playoffs without a single 5-star player, which was pretty cool. But that's a totally different situation, and you're stepping in where you're trying to fill a ton of talent with G5 talent coming into the SEC. That's kind of what has me concerned, that they're not going to find themselves out of this rut anytime soon.
Yeah, and Jackson, we'll get your thoughts here in just a second. The thing with Cignetti, I do think is worth pointing out. Yes, it's a lot of those Indiana players, and those guys have been impactful. Year one for them, like, it was a good team. It was a very talented roster. They did benefit from a weaker schedule in year one that allowed them to probably win more games than they should. But winning those games, and obviously what they did from an NIL standpoint, set them up that going into this season, Indiana was one of the top spenders in the portal and brought in a lot of really good players, not just from the G5 ranks. They went out and took guys from other power conference programs this year. Like, I think this year's Indiana roster is much more reflective of a legitimate power conference, really talented roster than maybe they were a year ago. So it's I don't know if that's the best comparison to draw if you're an Auburn fan. Maybe it is. Jackson, how do you feel about what's going on down on the plains?
We're going to wait and see if this works out for him. But all I can say is stick with your coach for at least more than 3 years. Don't mess with what's working, what's not working.
But do you do that in today's NIL and transfer portal days? I agree with you. I think traditionally that's what you do. But I mean, I think with today's new rules, I'm kind of more on the boat. And I say this more as looking at teams. I think Nebraska is a good example. I'm close to that program. My dad and my brother, really big Nebraska fans. I think Auburn is a good example. There's several teams that sometimes hanging on to a coach too long kind of gets you further away from what you used to be. And, you keep on holding on to it. I just think that the tides have turned, and I hate it. I don't like saying that. I agree with you, Jackson. But if you can't do it with today's resources, within 2 or 3 years, I think 4 years is about my sweet spot. Then, I think, if you're not showing any sign of progress through 3 years, yeah, it's probably time for you.
Yeah, but if you're like firing coaches every 3 years constantly, you're going to have a reputation that really hurts your program.
No doubt. That's why firing your coach at the right time is most important. And I feel like for Auburn's case, you fired your coach at the wrong time, because you weren't going to get any of the big dogs. And then you ended up going with what feels like to me like your second your second option, like a plan B.
Tucker, any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, we talked about Auburn a pretty good bit. I mentioned them with the Tennessee transfers, or not Tennessee transfers. Well, one of them is a Tennessee transfer with Nimrod, but the former Tennessee commit. But it's a fascinating team to watch. They'll be the second game Tennessee plays against an SEC team in Neyland next year, so I will be there to see them. The last time they came to Neyland with a brand new head coach, it did not end well for Tennessee. I don't think that is at all going to be the case with this offense. I think because Josh Heupel understands what Alex Golesh is going to do. And it's also interesting just because Tim Banks is on that staff now. But hey, to add to the intrigue, Tennessee did get one of their defensive backs in what was the guy's name? Kayan Lee earlier today. So there's some back and forth there that we haven't seen in a long time between Tennessee and Auburn. So that's going to be an interesting team to watch. I know because I mentioned this a couple of years ago when I guess Mississippi State hired Jeff Lebby, that you would see a team that was kind of similar to what Tennessee was that season, like can be an exciting offensive team. I know once the Shapen injury happened, that all kind of got derailed, but kind of exciting on the offensive end. Defensively, it may be a struggle to watch though.
Well, and by the way, too, I got done with counting them all up. So there's 17 total, either currently committed from USF to Auburn or projected to commit from USF to Auburn. That's just a lot of players to try to fill into an SEC roster from a G5 team.
They're definitely relying a lot on USF guys. And, the portal discussion is so interesting because I think a lot of people do view it through the lens of, well, look, you got the portal. You can immediately step in and have a competitive team. There's a lot of volatility with the portal. And I still think we're kind of seeing, I think Bud Elliott always uses the line from CBS Sports and Cover 3 Pod, portal roulette. If you're going to load up on transfers, if they hit, you're probably in for an awesome season. But if enough of those guys are not what you expected to be, especially because if you're loading up in the portal, you're expecting them to contribute, you're probably in big trouble. So it's going to be a big risk for not just Auburn, for a lot of these teams, because everybody's kind of playing that portal roulette game. We'll see how it works out for the Tigers. We've obviously spent a lot of time on the portal. We'll run through a few things quicker. Just a few other quarterbacks picked up in the SEC. Kenny Minchey goes to Kentucky. That was mentioned earlier, had been committed to Nebraska, agreed that he was going to be a Husker, and then the next day is going to Big Blue Nation. So it's interesting. Austin Simmons to Missouri, the former Ole Miss quarterback, does not follow Kiffin down to LSU. He'll go play for the Tigers, which I think is an interesting fit. Aaron Philo to Florida. That's one a lot of people were expecting. He was Georgia Tech's backup quarterback, a guy that Georgia Tech was very excited about as once they lost Haynes King, he had stepped in a few times and played really well. So he's going to know that system and fit that well. And then A.J. Hill, who was a former four-star recruit with Memphis, follows Ryan Silverfield over to Arkansas. Thoughts on any of those pickups for any of those teams?
Yeah, with Minchie going over to Kentucky, I know you can look up Will Compton's response, and that was pretty much the gist of what Nebraska felt there. Literally agreed to it, his agent said, all right, it's a done deal. We're good to go. And we're going to be flying out tomorrow to go sign the papers. And so everyone's like, cool, we got it. But before he could sign it, Kentucky comes in with what seems, from a lot of reports that I saw, doubling the money from Nebraska. And I honestly think, I know that we're not a Big Ten podcast, but I think Nebraska was better off because I like the guy that they got from UNLV a little bit better. But it was definitely like a one of those moments in the portal that just irritates me to no end. I think this was one of those really good examples of why people hate the transfer portal.
I do think it's a good addition for Kentucky. I know there was a lot of talk going into the season that Kenny Minchey was pushing C.J. Carr a lot for Notre Dame. C.J. Carr ended up being awesome and having a great season. So, I mean, if you're getting that type of player, Will Stein obviously knows offense, even though he's not going to be calling the plays. I did have more thoughts on Kentucky. I guess we can go ahead and get hit quick. I mean, I think they've got a pretty nice class coming in for what it's worth. They're loading up offensive line. Olas Alinen from Alabama. Probably screwed that name up. But Colton Price from Baylor, a 4-star transfer. Max Anderson coming in from Tennessee. I think Javonte Barnes showed flashes at times at Oklahoma. Maybe fell down the depth chart a little bit, but has had moments in his career where it could be a good player.
Injuries really held him back, but he is a great player. He's really good pass pro guy. He hits the hole hard. I think that was a really good pickup for them.
Antonio O'Barry from Gardner-Webb had it's a big jump, but had big time numbers at a lower level as an edge rusher. So can he step in and be a big contributor for them in the pass rush? I think Marquise Humphrey-Grace is coming back for another year. So if you have those two kind of as your defensive ends, that's a pretty nice duo there. Assuming that the new addition O'Barry is able to make the jump up. But yeah, I think they've had some decent pieces. See what they do at receiver. I think they've been in the mix for a couple of those, or at least one of the Auburn guys that's in the portal. Definitely got to get some better pass catchers in there, but I think Kentucky's off to a nice start. Any other thoughts on some of the quarterbacks that have transferred or classes that have stood out within the SEC, or just interesting things happening in the SEC in the portal?
Yeah, the Kentucky one is interesting just because they're going after a certain guy in the portal from what I've seen from a certain Kentucky media outlet that I think we all know, involving Matt Jones. But yes, they're targeting a certain guy on the offensive side of the ball. So I guess Will Stein has a method to his madness. The good news is they have not given him $22 million to spend, to my knowledge. But Kentucky, I think it's good for them to be putting something together that is solid on the offensive end. And then for Simmons, I think he will do well at Missouri with Eli Drinkwitz. Actually, because he was hurt there at the beginning of the season with Ole Miss, so that was part of the problem. But then also Trinidad Chambliss just stepped up and won the job. So you just felt like there had to be a new beginning there, and sure enough, there is. But the guy is already through college, and he's 20 years old. So my man can just focus on football at this point. So
yeah, that was something
that's a nice luxury. Yeah.
That was something Hayes Fossa put out, and I had to pull it up real quick because I was like, what was that I saw? So he finished high school as a freshman with a 5.34 GPA and then graduated from college last year, entered the portal as a grad transfer after only playing for 2 years. I was like, wait, what? I was like, this must be a fake account. And then I looked up and I was like, oh, it was Hayes Fossa that reported that. Wow, that's crazy. So not only is he really good when it comes to the books and doing well in school, but he's also really a dual sport athlete as well. So, which is really amazing. So, I like the guy a lot. And like you said, the injury kind of held him back a little bit this year.
Coming into the year, Austin Simmons, I'm not going to hate on the guy because he was a rebel. He was well liked by everyone. And everybody who talked to him said he's just like a brilliant young man, or just the most polite guy, and just really fun and smart to talk to. Talented passer. I think he's a better passer of the football. Did have turnover issues early in the year, but again, that's first time really being a starter, settling in. I think he's a better passer than what Drink has had really since he's probably been at Mizzou. And we'll see if the injury hampers his rushing ability. He is a guy that's probably not as good of a runner as Pribula was, but can give you that threat with his legs. But if they put enough pieces around him, definitely he's as talented as anyone they've had to this point. And which I guess Pribula was very talented from a profile standpoint, but I think he could be a really good player there. I do think Texas is interesting just with the offensive players that we've seen hit the portal. DeAndre Moore and Parker Livingstone at receiver. The Livingstone thing is odd, that statement. And then, I don't bat an eye at this point, guys going to the rival school, because it's a different era of the sport. They don't view it the same way kids used to, which I hate that, but that's just the reality now.
As a fan, though, is it not weird?
It's weird.
Weird.
It's where we're at. Cam Coleman's supposed to visit Alabama, and it's just that's college football now. It doesn't make sense, but Livingstone and DeAndre Moore hit the portal. All of the running backs, every running back to ever tote the football in the history of Texas football is in the transfer portal. Good players too. It's not like these are bad players. I know they did not all have the season they expected, and Josh, you're the closest to that team and understand. Do we think Sark is just trying to completely overhaul that side of the ball, or what's going on there?
So I don't know. I hear a lot of mixed reports because I hear Oklahoma people trying to report what's going on, and then I also hear Texas people trying to hide some truths. But then there are a lot of truths that are just over exaggerated by Oklahoma fans and Oklahoma reporters. But it does sound like what Sark is kind of doing is kind of going through his list of guys that he really wants to stick around. And I don't really know what's up exactly with the whole Parker Livingstone situation, but one thing is for him, he was actually recruited really highly out of high school, and Oklahoma was the place that he wanted to go out of high school, but they didn't give him the offer. And so now he gets the offer, and it was just an easy decision for him. So that kind of makes sense with the whole flipping from Texas over. I also think it's funny how Texas fans want to pretend like they didn't think that he was the best wide receiver on the roster. But it is a really odd situation. I feel like the biggest one that was a really big question mark for me was getting rid of Trey Wisner. Not getting rid of, but him leaving. So there's definitely something going on in that offensive room, and there are a lot of things that are kind of being pieced together about Sarkisian and what he said in the past, kind of all coming true now. And so it does definitely feel like this is kind of like I don't know if it's a good one, but it feels like a chess move from Steve Sarkisian.
You talked about Livingstone for a second going to Oklahoma. That was another transfer class that stood out to me. What have you seen from your Sooners so far?
As far as the transfer guys in, I feel like Oklahoma has done extremely well. And if you're an Oklahoma fan, you've got to be extremely happy with everyone they've got in. They're really filling all the roles that they really need. Wide receiver was really big. Getting the guy now drawing blank on names because way too many names have been popping in my head lately in the last few days. But getting the guy from Virginia, wide receiver
Harris.
there, yes, Trell Harris. Picking up really every position group that you really needed. Just picked up a linebacker from Michigan, I believe today. So you're plugging a lot of pieces. The big thing for wide receiver right now to me is Oklahoma's left with just one receiver from the 2024 class who was a former walk-on. So there's 4 guys, I believe it is, that have now left Oklahoma. And so the biggest concern for me when looking at the transfer portal for Oklahoma is not that the guys that are leaving are a big loss, because they're not really contributors for the most part. And I guess before today, there wasn't really a lot of main contributors or future contributors. The thing that concerns me about that is what is going on with the Oklahoma development, specifically in the wide receiver room. And I think there's some questions to be made in the running back room as well. But when you've got four wide receivers from the same class all leaving, and people want to say, well, because they were going after so-and-so, why do you feel as a coach that you're telling your player that you're developing, that you chose out of high school, that we would rather go get a proven commodity out of the portal? Why is that the case? And I think it boils down to a bigger question that really has to start to go pointing fingers at specific coaches who are supposed to be in charge of developing those players to get on the field and make a difference. But outside of that, Oklahoma's had an extremely exciting transfer portal class, and one that seems like it will and can make a really big difference here up into the 2026 season.
I think it has to be considered a great class solely because you signed Rocky Beers.
Yeah.
That was a position of need too.
A brother of one of the star basketball players on Oklahoma's women's basketball team too. So yeah, that was a really fun one to kind of get like I don't know if that's really considered legacy pick or not, but it kind of a legacy there at Oklahoma because the last name fits. And he actually mentioned in an interview too as somebody that he doesn't even drink, so he doesn't even condone it.
Couple quick things from me. I mean, I'll be the one to say it. I think Ole Miss has a very good class coming in. Obviously, the attention is the retention. The attention is on the retention rather. With if he gets the waiver approved, Trinidad Chambliss is coming back to Oxford, and obviously having. Why am I blanking on the running backs?
Kewan Lacey.
Kewan Lacey.
I can't believe it. I'm just trying to put them out of my mind right now.
No, yeah, their retention has been really surprising. That's the part that really caught my eye. Like, all right, you're catching, you're gaining the. I think the biggest part of that too is the fact that what's now I'm drawing a blank on the coach's name now.
Pete Golding.
Yeah, Pete Golding. And I almost said goalish earlier, and I was like, nope, we were already talking about him. But the fact that Pete Golding is sticking around, or not sticking around, the fact that he stepped up into that head coaching role, I think is a big part. It may not be. It's just from the outsider looking in. I feel like that could be a big part of the retention.
I saw last Friday's edition of First Take where Ryan Clark was talking with a pimp named Slipback. I mean, Cam Newton and Paul Feinbaum, where they were talking a little bit about LSU trying to get the staff members of Ole Miss to come with them. And Ryan Clark was like, look, I'm an LSU man, but come on. You got to finish what you start, especially the rest of this season first.
I have to think some of it. And the crazy thing with Lacey is, like, that's the guy. There was the viral video of Lane Kiffin in the car with his son having the phone call, basically saying that Lacey had already told him he was coming to LSU. Like, that was like a thing that went viral a month ago. And I wonder how much of this is a lot of the players on the roster sticking a middle finger to Lane. I know for a fact it's the Grove Collective sticking a middle finger to Lane. And obviously Ole Miss picked up, an LSU offensive lineman already, one of the top linemen in the portal, in Carius Kern, which, look, LSU's offensive line was – we'll see how taking transfers from the LSU offensive line works out.
That's so funny when like, it was so funny, like, after Kiffin left for a few days afterwards, he's going on Instagram saying all the players wanted me to stay through the and then they're all on Instagram or at saying, yeah, no.
Yeah. But look, Jay Crawford from Auburn, we talked about, that's a big loss for the Tigers. That's a great pickup at corner. Like, they need more help there. I think I like Jonathan Maldonado from Nevada as a pass rusher to give them some more help there. Sharif Denson from Florida at corner. Chris Jones, a linebacker from Southern Miss. That's a kid I can tell you from being here in the state of Mississippi. Dude can play. And they're losing. I think their starting linebackers are returning, but they're losing their other guys at the inside linebacker room after that. That's a big addition for them. So I think they've done a really nice job. Both of the players coming back, but already starting early in the portal, getting some pieces back. Let's close out here, and we won't go as long because I know Jackson's got to be gone at 9, and we've rambled here quite some time, and we still have to talk about the Fiesta Bowl.
Fiesta.
LSU, I do think, despite Kiffin getting dunked on, deservedly so, like, I think he's going to get a good quarterback because I think Damon Williams is happening. I love the receiver group. Jace Brown from K-State is a baller. Trey Brown is a guy that, like, I started because I knew State was going to need wide receivers, and I started looking at teams that run the same offense as State who, like, had receivers that were impressive. So Old Dominion runs that offense. So I was looking, and, like, Trey Brown was the first guy I saw. I was like, holy crap, that dude, big, rangy, and can run. And every pass to him is a deep ball that he just hauls in. So I love that addition. Eugene Wilson from Florida, we'll see, post-injury how he is able to improve. Jackson Harris was a baller at Hawaii. So, like, they got a great – the receiver talent has been upgraded there. Ty Benefield from Boise is a good player at safety. They're losing Halsey, so they got to get better in that room. Stephylan Green from Clemson, high upside defensive lineman, which that's another spot they're going to bolster up. I mean, the big thing is going to be, can they get – it's D-line and O-line. They got to get those two spots figured out because they're losing a lot of good defensive linemen, and then offensive line, as I just mentioned, was a train wreck for them a season ago. But they're prepared to spend, and they got a lot of big-time guys coming onto campus. So, I mean, I think he's going to sign a great class there, even with not getting the Ole Miss guys maybe he was assuming he was going to get. I think maybe he's not the portal king this time, but I think he is going to strike again and put together a good class first year there. Any closing thoughts from you guys on the SEC and the portal?
Well, I guess one real quick one, just to add to the whole point of how crazy the portal is and how it gets a bad rap because of specifically this. So there was 344 total SEC players that have entered so far. That was earlier today that I got that number too. So it might have even grown since we've been talking. There's been 130 players that have committed or signed with SEC teams, but the first weekend alone, there was over 4,000 players that entered into the portal, which was in the first weekend, there was over 1,300 more players this year than there was last year. And it just keeps on growing. And that's the part with the portal that I feel like is just insane, and it's kind of getting out of hand.
All right. Let's talk about the Fiesta Bowl. to close out tonight's show. Ole Miss, they're in the semifinals, taking on the Miami Hurricanes. This will be Thursday night.
Last hope.
Out in Glendale. Miami about a 3.5-point favorite, over under 52.5. Miami really, these are the two teams that had the most notable wins of the last round. Everyone, I think, was penciling in Ohio State, Georgia. Everyone was expecting that matchup outside of maybe a few believers here or there. We're getting Miami versus Ole Miss, not a matchup anyone was anticipating. We'll go around here, Jackson. We'll start with you. Just your initial thoughts on this matchup.
Well, I'm curious to see what the Ole Miss defense will do against Carson Beck, because a lot of people have talked about how Miami has won in spite of Carson Beck. I mean, you see what Mark Fletcher has been doing for the run game on Miami, and Miami's defensive line has just been monstrous all over the place this season. And they were a huge key reason as to why they beat the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I'm waiting to see what the defense can do, because they did just enough against the Bulldogs last week on New Year's Day, and we saw what Miami can do. Of course, so they're just bringing that magic, and I want to see more of what Chambliss can do pretty soon. I want to see if he can have those dual threat abilities again, which I think he can. But if Miami is stopping him, then Ole Miss is in trouble.
Yeah. I think that I would reflect on a lot of the same points I brought up in our little post-game show that we did after the Sugar Bowl, where it's like, who is going to win between that Miami defensive front and the Ole Miss offensive front? I know Ole Miss's offensive line is maybe a smidge outmatched there, but the thing is, you look at the skill players that they got with obviously Trinidad Chambliss and Kuwan Lacey. They have been able to get around good defenses a lot of the season. I know Josh unfortunately saw that in person. And then, Georgia, they've been able to do it too against Georgia really twice. I know the last quarter in Athens did not go according to plan, but 3 quarters they were able to get everything they wanted and more against that Georgia defense. Miami has been a little bit more consistent on that side of the ball this year. So I think that will probably be their biggest challenge this season, just in terms of a defense they're going to have to face. I don't know if I'd even put Indiana or Oregon up there as tough as the Miami defense. And then defensively, I don't know if Ole Miss is going to be as challenged this time around as it was against Georgia. Just looking at what we've seen from Miami so far in the college football playoff, Jackson mentioned they've run the ball respectively with Mark Fletcher, but it's not like Carson Beck is coming out and balling against some of these teams that we're seeing in the college football playoff. And other thing too, and I get there's a lot of turnover between now and then, but the last time a Carson Beck-led offense went against a Pete Golding-led defense, it did not end well for Carson Beck in Oxford, Mississippi. I'm not saying that will happen this time around. It will not be rainy. And the 4 interception games have become a little bit more of a rarity for him, but I don't know if Miami is necessarily built to get into a shootout with Ole Miss if Ole Miss can turn it into that type of a game.
Yeah, I look at this one being really similar to how I felt, really like any opponent that you watch Miami against, they win the trenches. And that's the biggest thing for me. And obviously SEC ball, everyone knows that. They are so good. Offensive line, defensive line, they win both sides of the trenches. They did that against Ohio State. It's a big part of why they won. Another reason why they won against Ohio State was just forcing turnovers on defense, finding a way to force those turnovers. The big pick 6 is really what kicked it off for them and got them rolling. And I think this Miami team, everything on paper leads towards, I think that they come away with this one and beat Ole Miss. But the thing with Ole Miss that you can't count out is that they've kind of taken on that hard to kill mantra that Oklahoma was carrying on this season, that you've seen teams like Georgia and Alabama carry on as well in the past. So it feels like Ole Miss has been that way because they get behind, they are trailing and somehow find a way to squeeze their way out of it and stay alive. So it's going to be a really interesting story. It's going to be a really interesting game, but I do think that when I'm looking at it on paper, I feel like Miami, just because of how tough that defense is, and willing and able to force turnovers, and how hungry they are for them, and then the trenches just make me feel pretty confident about Miami's ability to finally take down Ole Miss.
All three of you have talked about lines of scrimmage, and I'm going to do the same because it's just – I think it's the thing that's the biggest key here, and it's, to me, which defensive line performs better is who ultimately decides this game. When it's the Ole Miss offense on the field, the question for Ole Miss is, can they give Trinidad Chambliss just enough time? Because I don't think they're going to be able to run the football particularly effectively against that Miami front. I think it's like Kawan Lacey is a guy who can create even when the blocking is not outstanding in front of him. And I'm sure he'll break off some good runs. And there was a couple drives against Ohio State where the Buckeyes were really able to line up and just started playing like downhill gap scheme power football, and they were having success. So I'm sure Ole Miss will be able to do that a little bit, but I don't think the run game is something they're going to be able to lean on in this game. So I think it comes down to the pass game. And for much of the year for Ole Miss, it's been getting the ball out quick. Like, that is the big thing with Chambliss, is they've done an outstanding job of letting him just sort of look at the whole field, pick a matchup, take it. And he's done a great job at that throughout the season. And that can kind of neutralize a pass rush like Miami's. Like, yeah, Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, like, those guys are absolutely awesome. It's going to be one of the best, probably the best defensive line that they have seen. I know Oklahoma is up there. But, I mean, you got a couple potential first-round picks on that Miami defensive line that they're going to be facing. It's going to be about as good as they're going to have seen. If the Ole Miss but look, even with the quick passing game, though, I do think Miami has done a pretty good job the last couple of weeks of their guys rallying up and making plays. And with the quick passing game, finding ways to go and tackle, which is why the other thing I kind of look at here, can you give Chambliss enough time to attack downfield? Because for as good as Miami's defense has been all year, at least once a game, they get burnt deep. Like, you can hit big plays on the Miami defense. Like, Ohio State did it with Jeremiah Smith. Mario Craver had one for Texas A&M against Miami, which, credit to Miami's defense, they immediately stepped up and kept A&M without points on that possession. But, like, you can get downfield against Miami if you have time. It's just it's so hard for most teams to find time because of how good that pass rush is. And, look, Ole Miss has the weapons in the receiving corps. So if Ole Miss is able to hit a couple explosive plays, like they can protect Chambliss just enough, that's going to be big for their offense, and that's probably what ends up – that could be like deciding plays within this game. Other side of the ball, can the Ole Miss D-line build off the performance they had against Georgia? Because if you remember the first quarter and a half, Georgia was lining up under center and running right at the Ole Miss defensive front and bowling them over. I thought Georgia was on pace, going to run for 300 yards the way they were playing early in that game. Something clicked, and I didn't pay close enough attention to know what they did, but Will Eccles and Xavier Harris, Suntrain Perkins, that group up front for Ole Miss got it together, and Georgia was not able to effectively run the football the rest of the game. And it wasn't until they started attacking downfield that they were able to have some success, which is not really the comfort zone for the Georgia offense. And that's why Georgia got behind in the game, and why, look, they were able to come back tied up, but ultimately couldn't get it done. Miami has a great offensive line, one of the best offensive lines in the country. Mark Fletcher, we've talked about him already. The dude has been on fire these last few weeks. Miami's going to want to line up and run the football. Like, that's what they're going to want to do in this game. If Miami's able to do that effectively in this game throughout, Ole Miss is probably going to have a hard time. But if the Ole Miss defensive front does what they did in the last game, then I think all of a sudden it becomes a much tougher task for Miami because, I don't think Miami is a team that's set up to attack downfield, which is kind of what I think you have to do against the Ole Miss defense. Like, Ole Miss, if you can run it on them and you can hit the shots downfield, and I know that's very obvious football, but like if you're doing those two things on Ole Miss, you're going to score a lot of points. Miami's not necessarily been a downfield passing team. It's a lot of underneath stuff, throwing to Malachi Toney. Like, Carson Beck's strength is not throwing down the field. So if the Ole Miss defensive front has a big gain here and limits their ability to run the ball, I think Ole Miss is going to have a great chance. But it's really going to be which D-line balls out in this game. Let's go through, get everybody's predictions real quick to close this thing out. Jackson, who are you taking?
I reluctantly have to go with Miami in a 27-24 victory, although I'll be pulling like hell for the Ole Miss Rebels on this one because I just want to see Lane Kiffin have his ego bruised really bad.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you're almost like spot on. I picked 28-24 Miami. That's my prediction. But I'm right there with you. I wouldn't mind seeing an Indiana Ole Miss national championship. The Cinderella that was ranked number 1, and then the Cinderella that should have never made it here because their coach quit on them before they could even get there. So yeah, I'm going to go 28-24 Miami.
Going to be the lone person that picks Ole Miss here. I'm going to go 28-24. I feel like you have to split the difference, though, with this because I definitely don't think this will be a high-scoring game just because of the way Miami plays defense. But I don't envision Miami keeping Ole Miss down for that long just because of what we've seen from that offense all season. Like, I'm trying to think, what is the lowest output Ole Miss has had in a game all season long? Like, have they scored less than 30 in a game?
That's a really good question.
Yes, they.
Oh no, it was LSU. It was 24 against LSU,
which happened twice. Also, 24 against Washington State as well.
Okay, but both of those were fairly early in the season. So down the stretch, they have consistently been breaking 30. So, but again, I don't think Miami's defense will let them get there. I also just don't think Miami's defense is going to get all of the stops this time around, like it was able to against Texas A&M for the most part, and then for a good portion of the game against Ohio State.
You're not going to be alone because I don't know if this is me just trying to accept what's about to happen and ruin my life. If it's that, if it's an emotional hedge, if it's also definitely a little bit of a reverse jinx. We'll see what happens. The point you made about Ole Miss, even against good defenses, they've had solid days offensively. I think that probably happens again. They do just enough. And Miami's offense has looked like crap, but like in the playoff, like it has not been good. And Ole Miss defensively I don't trust them a lot, but Ole Miss defensively, I thought they gave up a lot of points and yards to Georgia. I thought they played well against Georgia, like even with some of the numbers allowed. And I think they're going to find a way to get enough stops. I think 27-21, kind of in that range. I mean, it's a one possession game, but yeah, I'm probably just reverse jinx, emotional hedge, whatever. But something tells me this is just going to keep happening for Ole Miss. So I'll take them to get the win, and I will be the lone one on the show that hopes I'm wrong. But I guess Tucker, doesn't want to be wrong, but
I would cheer for Miami, but like I said, I'll be watching it with Nebraska fans, my dad and my brother. So, they have
they hate
a strong hatred for the Canes. So,
yeah. That'll do it for us tonight. Obviously, a long episode. I know, but we had a lot to get into and had a lot of fun talk with the transfer portal and some of those draft declarations. Be sure, if you haven't already, to leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to SEC at the Voice of College Football. And, hey, turn those notifications on. You want to know when we're going live for episodes like this and all the great content. Jackson's been pumping out interviews left and right on the channel. You're definitely going to check out all of that fantastic content. And we'll try to have somebody here post-game, if not a few of us post-game after tomorrow night to react to whatever happens in the Fiesta Bowl. But between the Rebels and the Hurricanes, we'll see if Ole Miss keeps this run going and can reach the national championship game. Appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.